Joining us now is the CEO and the Chief Investment Officer with Great Lakes Wealth and the one of the co-hosts of the What Dewey Do podcast. Dewey Steffen's back with us once again on the MegaCast. Dewey, thank you for being with us.
Hey, Tyler, great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Hey, good to see you as well. So, kind of an interesting time we're in. The economy's kind of all over the place. High inflation, low unemployment rate, up and down stock market, and then there's never any certainty necessarily in the stock market or in investing. So at this time, what is your advice in terms of things that people should be focusing on in the market that may be protective, but also be putting out a little bit of that risk that could be a big boom for them in the future?
Well, Tyler, you hit it right on the head. As Confucius say, may you live in interesting times. And we certainly have those. So yes, it comes back to the basics, though, of the 3 Ps in this environment. Don't panic, be patient, and execute your plan. So as we always say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So whether it's certain times of maybe a year or two ago to uncertain times of now, if you will, you always just have to have a plan and, you're on your way.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of Great Lakes Wealth, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. So, inflation's high, the cost of goods and services are also at record high levels in some cases. How does that change the way that you approach investment advice and how people that are out in the market should be approaching their investments, given that at some point this adjustment will be made, things may return back to some semblance of normal, but it could be a while in the market before that adjustment's made?
Tyler, again, you're right on it. So this is part of the business cycle. For a long time, we were in the early phase, the middle phase. We think we're in the late phase. And then the 4th phase is actually recession. So we haven't talked about recession in a long time. In 2008, we had the Great Recession. More recently, when COVID started, we had a mild, fast recession. A recession is 2 quarters back-to-back of negative GDP. So with high inflation, as you mentioned, with all the things that are changing, your investment strategy needs to change as well. What got us here is not what's going to get us there in terms of investing. So we say things like rotate and rebalance.
So when you're talking about preparing yourself for a potential recession, that can, I would imagine, for a lot of people, be spooky, be something that spooks them into maybe getting out of the market in certain places or moving some of their money around into safer investments. What should they be doing to prepare for that point where we do go through the cycle and into the recession point so that they're not losing a ton of money in the market from their investments, from their investment stock prices going down due to the recession and the ultimate effects of that, but also in a way that doesn't affect them and their potential gains down the line when the market does adjust back to some semblance of normal or in a positive direction?
Certainly. So we're not in recession yet. So let's slow down and understand where we are. You mentioned our podcast. So the What Do We Do podcast, I have our little mug right here. We had an episode that came out last Wednesday, number 57, and we talked about at the end of the first quarter and how to invest for success for the rest of this year. We talked about this being the late stage of the business cycle from our perspective, and the investments are different. So you need to have hard assets. You need to have investments that pay dividends. You need to recognize, again, where we are and have a playbook for success. And Tyler, to your point, what got us here is not what's going to get us there. And with a recession, it doesn't have to be a deep dive recession. It can be what's called a mild recession. And the reason the markets are under pressure and a lot of the stock markets globally are negative, and some of them are into what they call bear markets, if you want to call it that, it's because people are trying to front run and prepare and get out prior to this recession. And again, we don't think that's appropriate because we're not in recession yet. So again, it's not convoluted. It's just you need to understand what you're trying to accomplish and why. But in late stage investing, it is not the tech stocks that get you where you need to be. When the Fed is raising rates, when there is a slowdown in the economy, it is not the NASDAQ, it is not the tech stocks that lead the charge. It is a whole new set of investments. Those, again, that pay dividends, those that are more the large cap in nature. So again, you need to understand what you have and where you're going.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, CEO and Chief Investment Officer with Great Lakes Wealth. More information on the website, greatlakeswealth.us. And we also mentioned the What Do We Do podcast. You can learn more information and view their episodes and listen to their episodes on whatdewedopodcast.com. That's what Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y, do podcast.com for more information on the podcast. And, of course, you can learn more about it as well at greatlakeswealth.us. And so we're in the middle of April. We're approaching the end of the school year for colleges and universities. That means graduation. That means new people coming into the job market and full-time work, and some of those will have benefits with their new employers and be able to begin their own investing, or be able to do, or are more than capable of doing so now, even before that. So for these young people that are coming into the workforce, that are coming into the market for the first time, what is your advice for them as they're entering this market, especially given the times that we're in, to put their best foot forward and start planning for their future?
Tyler, great question. And this is an exciting time to be a college graduate. It might be filled with anxiety, but in days gone by and decades past, students would come out of college and say, there's no jobs. There's no jobs. I don't know what to do. I can't get a job. This will be the first time ever in history that the kids coming out of college won't be able to get jobs and live the best life, compared to their parents and grandparents. Well, it's the opposite. There are 11 million jobs posted and only 6 million people looking. We have full employment of 3.6% unemployment, which is full employment. However, there's 11 million jobs available out there. And we did a podcast on this thing called the Great Resignation, where more than 50% of people working are not happy where they're at. A lot of times the employees can dictate wages right now. There's a lot of things going on. So if I'm coming out of college now, I am fired up. So what you need to do is then be responsible. Certainly when you get that opportunity and get employment, then set yourself up for success. Enroll immediately into the company-sponsored retirement plan, either a 401k or 403b. And if they match, you absolutely better be putting enough of your own money in to get that entire match. And then from there, you just take steps 2, 3, and 4. But I'll take a break, see what you have to say.
And so with those students coming out, with them getting those jobs that are available to them, and many of those having benefits be attached to them as an incentive to get some of these high quality candidates fresh out of college, fresh out of university into these jobs, that also brings up the topic of student loan debt. On one hand, you have an opportunity to invest your money and get that full match, but on the other hand, your paychecks by and large going toward your bills and certainly to start paying down those debts. So what's your advice for those students coming out into the workforce and into the market now with their loans now beginning to be due in full capacity, to make that balance between paying their bills, of course, is always important, but also not neglecting their financial planning for the future?
Yeah, it's just like everything else. You need to have a diversified portfolio. You need to have good debt and retire or get rid of or service bad debt. You also need to make sure you have good investments and get rid of or service or retire bad investments. So it kind of goes both ways. With that, in terms of your debt and where we're at now, interest rates are going up. And that doesn't matter whether it's your school loans and that debt, or credit card debt, or a mortgage. So we say deal with debt. That's actually number one, deal with debt. So get rid of bad debt, but also take advantage of good debt. If you are going to be getting purchase a new home or a condo or something, a car, whatever it might be, get those interest rates locked in now. They're going to be going higher. So deal with debt, get rid of bad debt, and lock in what we would consider good debt. That's number one, Tyler. And then after that, you need to invest in your company plan. You need to also, with student debt, it's probably in the lower interest rate range. So you can make your minimum payments on that, service that debt, but also with the extra income that you have, don't blow it. Don't go party. Don't start with vacations. Make sure you start responsibly, invest for success, deal with debt, and you're on your way to prosperity.
We're joined by Dewey Steffen, CEO and Chief Investment Officer at Great Lakes Wealth. Learn more information on their website, greatlakeswealth.us, and a ton of financial tips and investment tips from their podcast, the What Dewey Do podcast, whatdeweydo.podcast.com for more information and to watch and listen to all of their episodes and find their social media as well. And so, Dewey, as you have all these different options in the market, at this given time, there's always that debate between beyond your company-matched investments, usually a 401k, do you invest in an IRA, in a Roth IRA, or in some other investment form in the market? Is it a good time for an IRA to start that off, or to really put a lot of effort into building an IRA or a Roth IRA at this time, given the market that we're in?
Absolutely. So taxes are predicted to go up as well because of paying for all the things dealing with COVID, plus the situation we're in. So your 401k at work or 403b, as well as IRAs and Roths, those are considered tax sheltered or tax-free vehicles, Tyler. So they're so important for today because you can get at least tax deferred growth, but maybe even tax-free growth. And when tax rates will be higher, as again, younger people have increases in their wages, your tax rate goes up as well. So all the way around, make sure you do your 401k or 403b, even if there is no match. That doesn't matter. Still do that. And then if you qualify for a Roth IRA, which is basically under $140,000 of income for this year, if you're single, and you actually have until April 18th, which is next Monday, to put in for last year, so it's not too late for 2021. So do your Roth IRA, absolutely, number one, no doubt about it.
So on that note, you mentioned that April 18th deadline for putting money into your IRA for the 2021 tax year, despite us being 4 months and some change into 2022. How can that impact ultimately your tax implications for 2021 and even impact potentially your tax return, which then can be further invested into the market?
Well, even if you've already filed your 2021 tax return, you can still amend it, or in this case, you can just still deposit to a Roth IRA if you qualify. It does not have any bearing on your tax return. There's no deductions. There's no, penalties. There's no anything. So you can still go ahead and do your Roth IRA. When you start talking about different retirement vehicles, whether that's a traditional IRA, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And as we always say, please consult a tax professional, a CPA, a financial advisor. Don't go it alone. Find some help, and we'll be happy to help.
More information on their website and get in contact with them for help if you so choose to do so. GreatLakesWealth.us. That's GreatLakesWealth.us. Their podcast, What Dewey Do podcast, Dewey, D-E-W-E-Y, What Dewey Do podcast.com to listen to all those episodes. And let's talk about the What Dewey Do podcast. You mentioned some of the more recent episodes. What is on the docket for the What Dewey Do podcast? What sort of advice can listeners expect to learn in the near future?
Tyler, I am so excited to share that our podcast, which is now almost 2 years old, has over 30,000 downloads and views and listens. That's incredible, from something that just started here as a community project during COVID to help members of our community not just survive, but thrive. And as we've grown and the podcast has grown, so has our content. I do have a co-host, Brooke Allen. She's a radio on-air personality. She's fantastic. So her and I kind of tackle subjects together, but we also bring in guests. And Tyler, this is where it's exciting. We've had amazing guests on the past. We've had Red Wing great Darren McCarty. We've had Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary. Here locally, and this would be important for those that are maybe coming out of college, we had Casey Herbis, the Chief Marketing Officer at Rocket Mortgage. We've had recently David Provost, the retired chairman of the board from Huntington Bank. But here who's coming up next. We have Tom Chilani. He is a businessman local. He is a philanthropist, national, global. He'll be coming on in the next month or so to talk about, how his family started from modest means and how he's grown this amazing empire of entrepreneurship. So that's Tom Chelani coming up. And then to end of season 2, we have a commitment from LPGA star Jessica Korda, and she's going to give an interview with us exclusive for the What Do We Do podcast in June. And she, again, is going to talk about all things in her world, from investing to what it takes to be a successful athlete and everything from being a female in a competitive environment. So we're excited for the content we have in terms of educating in financial matters, but also bringing on leaders in the community to tell their story and their suggestions to help our community not just survive, but thrive.
GreatLakesWealth.us is their website, GreatLakesWealth.us, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn at Great Lakes Wealth as well. The What Do We Do podcast can be found online, whatdowedopodcast.com, or by following any of the Great Lakes Wealth social media, again, at Great Lakes Wealth. Dewey, thank you for joining us.
Hey, awesome to be here with you, Tyler. Thanks again for having me.